It.
Great.
All right. As far as overall announcements go, I just wanted bringing this back up so I remember the dates right to bring our attention back to the fact. I know we all know about Dash coming out next month, but then in November, about a month after Dash, November 11 to 13, that's a Monday to Wednesday, we'll have the PyHC fall meeting. The website or the webpage, I should say, is all up for that in the normal spot if you just go to PyHC and then the meetings tab. And then the 2 days following that is going to be the follow-up science data system workshop. If you recall, the last one was that end of April, early May? I forget. It's been so long already. Details on that to come, but if you're planning to come for the PyHC fall meeting and are also interested in science data systems, plan to stay Thursday and Friday for that as well. And I think that's all I have off the top of my head. Sean, do you have anything?
Nice. Not well, maybe I guess would it be worth just briefly mentioning that we think our job ad went out for that HSSI proposal?
Ah, yes. So we put out the student job ad as far as the Helio software search interface goes. Per the way the grant was written, it has to be a CU undergrad. So it's gone out to all of the undergrads on our campus. And I already got a couple emails saying some people have applied. So that's really exciting.
Good news. I hadn't heard that yet.
Yeah. I think I need to get you added. It's like through this handshake application system. Anyway. But yeah, that went out. That went out.
Yeah, we had submitted that with last kind of a while ago, but they took almost a whole month getting our job ad to actually get posted online. But
So it goes.
that's how that happened. And I guess this is maybe more of a question than an announcement, or maybe both. But obviously we're going to be talking about FEPS and stuff today, and I was kind of hoping to announce the first vote for FEP 3, the one that I've been spearheading, um, as long if that goes well today. And I guess I was wondering if it's good. Well, I mean, I know my own process. We should be emailing it out too, but I guess I just wanted to mention that that was one of my goals for today. If today went well, I'm hoping to announce that we can have the first vote for FEP 3 at the fall meeting, and we're supposed to do that at least a month before the meeting starts. So technically, I have like, what can I do math? 18 more days left to announce that, but I could do it a little early, hopefully.
Yeah, that sounds good. Can put out in the meeting follow-up email that that's going to happen. Extra measure.
Great. But yeah, I didn't have any other announcements today, I don't think.
Cool. Sounds good. All right. Well, I suppose to kick the show off, I put in the standards repo link. Um we've got a couple different pull requests on there for the various steps that are going on right now. And then there's also several issues there that are kind of like pre-VEP type material. And I know that John Niehoff submitted a couple different ideas in there. So we'll just be going over, what all's out there right now just to get people's eyes all on that and thinking about it. Um, Especially before the fall meeting. I know we'll have some time to kind of talk through these again then. There'll be a vote for some of them even, and so forth. So let's see. How about since it's newer to most people on this call, John, do you want to go ahead and go through some of the issues that you'd put up just to get people's eyes and thoughts on them?
Yeah, sure. Unfortunately, I'm also opening yet another issue. No, I'm just in the process of writing up the table conversation so that we can pull that out of the discussion of your FEP and be thinking of that in more general terms. Alrighty. Let me just go and pull up a reasonable starting point here. We'll just work from there. Um, Sorry, just getting the um, tabs opened.
Take your time.
Yeah. All right. So I hope that the standards documentation standards document is not unfamiliar to people. This is kind of what we've been working off of for 6 years now. But this is really kind of what we could agree to at the first meeting, and there have been some discussion of updating it. The 2019 meeting had some fairly concrete suggestions that wound up kind of languishing. There's actually, I think, an open pull request on that. So my thought was to kind of go back through, grab some of these are being addressed. So for instance, Sean's work reflects a fair bit, particularly on the Python 3, but a few other things, and we're discussing licenses in Julie's tiering FEP. But I just went back through and grabbed the groupings that we had done for the package evaluation, because we initially had written these as individual standards, and then when we were working on the package evaluation, this seemed to be too granular for talking about how a package was working. So we wound up doing these lumps into kind of 6 big categories. And those seem to be a good scope to use to discuss things. So I've opened up 3 issues which would nominally potentially result in 3 FEPs. But I want to have a chance for everybody to kick around the ideas beforehand. And that is lumped. Let's talk about the community and license one first. So this is kind of the open development category. So this is the things that were in our community standards. This was the license standard. And all of these are structured pretty similarly. Here's, I lay out the existing standards. There's some notes in that pull request of which things have some open suggestions to look at. And then I'm just throwing out my straw man so people have something to rip apart. Basically, kind of small changes that seem to be where we're moving. So we can capture that. So this is one for the community and license. I've got one for documentation because that's kind of stands on its own, which I think we could talk about forever. In fact, this was one I couldn't even think of good draft language, so I just threw out some possible categories. And then I also actually bumped the testing and software maturity together and suggested resplitting it into kind of a development practices and packaging standards. Particularly since packaging standards, we're talking quite a bit about OS support. I think this gets into the question of packaging for Conda versus just PyPA and that kind of thing. So we could get into the weeds if people have had a chance to look at this and have specific things, but I think the first thing is I'm going to actually stop share here so we can see faces. And what do people think of this notional idea of just trying to do a revisit of where we're at, maybe a regrouping, kind of bring things into the FEP approach, as opposed to relying on who happened to be at a meeting 6 years ago?
I mean, I'll jump in first and say that's what I was doing on Friday, was reviewing these issues that you had opened up. And I think for the most part, it's pretty non-controversial stuff. And I liked even your straw man suggestions that you threw in most of them there. Because, yeah, a lot of this is just the standards capture the basic ideas of what we've been going for as a community, but we've evolved in the thinking a little bit in the years since we've made them. And I think it's personally pretty good idea to, what was the word you used, repatriate the standards with some new FEPs just to flesh out some more ideas, like specifically recommending Get as the version control. Like, let's please not use any of the older outdated types of version control people used to use. That's a good recommendation. So yeah, this is kind of an idea to add a more fine-tooth comb and more details to the general ideas that are in the standards without having to go through and modify that document, which itself comes with some baggage.
I agree. I mean, in my mind, this is what the FEP process was made to be able to do, was this idea. So, but I'd love to hear from the community and not just the leadership board. What are y'all's thoughts as active package maintainers?
Well, yeah, yeah, I have to say I'm sick of seeing that old standards file.
Yep.
I mean, I will. I wasn't at the meeting, but I'll say it's garbage now. It was garbage in 2019 as well. So anything that replaces it is better for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think that's brings up something that, Sean mentioned this is relatively non-controversial in the sense that it's not a huge step from what we had in the standards. So it would be good to find these, if what we do with these FEPs is move up to current, that's great. It'd be nice if we can find places where we can be a little more future looking and say, okay, we're at, hopefully most of the stuff we're kind of at like 100% agreement on this is a baseline good thing. But if there's stuff where we're at 70 or 80% and we think this is the point where we need to wrestle about getting to 100% on some stuff, then this may be a chance for that as well. I don't want to be in too many cases where we are at 50% agreement and try to resolve that here. But um, so if folks have thoughts that are a little more forward looking, don't let the conservatism of what I've put in there be too limiting.
So is the idea that we would do away with the standards document entirely, or that it would just basically become a summary of existing FEPs?
It would replace the FEPS would replace the standards document.
Okay. I mean, I appreciate that the standards document is not very, is slightly outdated and is not very detailed in some places, but it is nice that it's one document that we can sort of point to and that we often have pointed to. Not, it's not perfect in, by any means, but I think there's a lot of power in it being just in one place and some simplified. So yeah, I think.
Well, is it worth summarizing? Once we add new standards to FEP in FEPs, we have a standards document which just summarizes.
That was,
Yeah.
yeah, my like zeroth order thought that you could just have one, like the standards document then would become just a summary of, and then would point to the more detailed that specifications.
Yeah,
I
I
have
think,
that.
yep. We've kind of already started to go down that road in my FEP 3 because it does explicitly replace the Python 3 standard that all projects must use Python 3. And the text in that document that we've said we're replacing the standard with, it ends with C FEP 3 and a link to it. So I would imagine all of the other points in the standards basically going that direction where we could still keep that document and just clean up the wording a little bit, but then at the end of every point is going to say C and then link to a FEP. So we've got a more detailed explanation of what we mean, but I do still think there's value in having the quick summary document.
Yeah, one thing that might be nice in the summary document, because we have our standards groupings, but we don't mention these groupings in the standards document itself. So having that outlined would be nice in one spot.
Yeah, that's true. We could
Yeah,
categorize
I'm
it.
looking back at the our kind of list of sections. What I'm wondering is, so we have a requirement for an abstract in the FEPS, and so I wonder, because I'm thinking, how do we want to manage the summary document, right? Do we want that to be something else that has any level of judgment applied, or do we just say take the abstract from each of the FEPs, slap it in one document and say, okay, here is our list of standards. Here is the abstracts and the titles, and here's the link to the full specification.
I'd maybe imagine a more human in the loop refining process, just because the abstracts themselves even tend to be like a paragraph or two already. And I kind of like more of like a sentence or two per bullet summarizing like we've got at the moment.
Yeah, I liked Rebecca's suggestion in the chat of having like one summary paragraph and then little bullets on each FEP and then a link to them after the fact, maybe grouped according to our standards FEPs, I guess now groupings, something like that. Would that itself need to be a formal FEP? Or can we just iterate on it as a community at meetings, or what are thoughts on that?
I don't know if it would need its own FEP. Might be helpful, but unnecessary. But one thought I am noticing is that this does solve a problem for us. Sorry, not to go on too big of a tangent, but part of the reason we haven't updated that standards document in a while is because we have not had a formal process for how to do that. So boom, what we're suggesting here is a formal process we can get behind for updating that thing. I would say it's an open question right now as to whether we have to actually use a FEP to define how the standards document, summary document, whatever it gets rewritten, or if we can just do whatever we feel like. But I feel like do whatever we feel like we could get away with at the moment, as long as the FEPs are good enough.
Yeah, because the PEPs are going to have all eyes on them and then community agreement on it in the end. And so the summary document wouldn't be proposing anything new or anything that hadn't already been voted on. So I think just being able to summarize it would be okay, but
Would it make sense to do a summary document or to potentially put a little bit more meat in the page where we list the FEPs and put like an introduction above the standards track ones?
I need to think that one through.
Yeah, I think so too.
The thoughts in everyone's mind, so I'm sure there'll be some hacking or more discussion time or a mix of both at the fall meeting that we can talk through this more.
So it sounds like there's definitely one additional thing, which is, hey, yay, another issue in the standards repository, which is just, I'll open up an issue that's discussion of the idea of the summary document and replacing the standards explicitly, not just follow on FEPs for each category. And that may help give some of that higher level structure a chance to be discussed.
Okay, super helpful. Thank you. And that'll remind me to keep mulling it around in my head, get more opinionated on that.
Agreed. Did you have anything else to say on your issues, John?
Not really. I would love for people to take a look at them and see where they think they go too far, or more likely where they think they don't go far enough, and just if this is a good path forward and what we should have in there. I don't think I need to take up more time in the meeting because this overarching summary thing is really important feedback, and I think a good place for us to be continuing.
Yep.
Awesome. Well, thanks, John. Let's see. So those were the issues in place that I mainly wanted to bring up, but I know there were a couple other issues that have been put somewhat recently into the standards repo. And if I just want to have a moment here, if anyone wanted to talk about anything they put up. Nick, I know you had a couple, but I think they're mostly tied to the current FEPs in place. So if and when those pass, then your issues would close. I'll just give it 10 seconds to see. Okay, cool. Well, then we'll move on. So also in the standards repo, apart from the issues are, oh, go ahead, Sean.
Yep. I might bring up the most simplest one here. We've only got a few people on the call, but I could get a quick yes or no for this. One issue that actually the earliest open issue in the standards repo right now is Steve Christ has suggested we could all add our orc IDs to the people page in the PyHC website. You know, I don't know that too many people actually ever visit that page, but do you all remember pyhc.org/people, where we've got the little circular pictures of our faces and our names and GitHub handles under there? What do people think about adding orc IDs to that? Because I've kind of got that on my to-do list now to add the feature, but it would be an optional, like, let me know if you want to throw yours on there and I'll put it there. So for the people on the call, I'd be curious, yes or no, would you personally put yours on that page, or would you want that?
Rebecca.
What's up?
You're talking my language. So let me put another motivation behind this. So the org IDs could also be a way to tackle the contact issue. 'Cause right now you have names and links to web pages, and it's not obvious or even possible in some of those listings to contact a developer. So if you require at least one person on a given software package to put their org ID, or looking at the chat, okay. So if it's not possible for someone in a package to put an org ID, then LinkedIn, some way to contact the person if they don't want their email listed publicly. Maybe it could be a work email, right? But tying those pieces together could also resolve the contact information problem.
Yep.
Yeah, I think I'd actually put in a unconference issue on that for figuring out the best way to get context for people for packages without directly listing emails on our page. Do we want to sort by name instead of GitHub ID? I do like that, John.
Yep. That would be a simple thing for me to change.
Yeah. Oh, well, has an interesting idea. Tag everyone, ask them to post their org ID on that issue, give them a window to respond, and if they don't or say that it is impossible, then don't include it. So opt-in optional.
No, definitely. And I'm certainly not kicking around the idea of making it required by any means. I just wanted to see if anyone thought that'd be useful in any way, and is it worth me taking the half day or so it'll take to implement the feature and then stick a place in GitHub for people to be able to do that.
Oh, Jen, what's an org ID? Oh
I'll
gosh.
take that question.
Well, I don't remember what it stands for, but I know what it is.
Nobody really does. But basically, it's a numerical identifier for people. So, you have these DOIs for your publications nowadays. Well, they also have such identifiers for people, so ORCIDs. They also have it for research institutions, that's RORs, so on and so forth, right? Um, yeah, and Johnny Hoff posted it in the chat. And he apparently figured out what the acronym is. But basic explanation, yes. I could show you an example. I'll put a link to mine as an example. Not that it's completely ideal, but it gives you an example of what to look at. Okay.
Yeah. And it's like, for me, it's the thing that ties all my research publications together on Google Scholar and that kind of thing. And I think it's just become pretty standard, like the main number scientists have been using to identify themselves.
It can double as a CV also.
Oh.
The way that it's set up. So, who had the question? It was Jim. Do you want a little more detail on that, or you want to dig on your own?
No, thanks for the explanation. I think I get the concept and seems like a good idea. Seems like something I would want to have.
I hope so. It helps on my side of the pond.
I think
All right.
NSF is requiring them now, actually.
Interesting.
I recall there was something where recently where I had to put an org ID was the only way to get into a grant
It is
application.
moving in that direction, but
Well, I'm only hearing basically positive reactions for the most part. So I'm hearing it's worth at least having the option for us to include those in there. So I will not remove it from my to-do list until I've actually gone and made that a thing. Cool. Thanks, guys.
We could add it as some hackathon time at the fall meeting to give you time to focus on it that's not taking over other things.
Sweet.
Yeah, in the meantime, I guess, I don't know, that issue is still up on the standards repo, obviously. If you have ideas for what you would put if you can't or don't want to put your orc ID, what you would want instead, maybe throw those ideas in there. Not to pick on you, Angeline. I know you said you couldn't. So if you have something or an idea, please feel free to put it in.
Actually, I misheard, and I heard organization instead of work ID. So I can put my work ID in. That's totally fine.
Oh, cool.
And I think it's a
Yay.
good idea, especially for people who move a lot, because you can just keep updating your email there, and all of your old emails exist. So people can see who you are as you move.
Beautiful. Okay, cool. Yeah, I could see how organizations being listed could be problematic in certain cases. That makes complete sense.
Yep.
Kevin, a link to GitHub is okay, but not org ID. The only issue with GitHub is there's not always a good contact information automatically put there. I've gone to some people's GitHub IDs and their name's there, kind of. Sometimes it's not even like a full actual name, but there might not be an email or a way to actually talk to people. So that's the main issue with that. But having the GitHub ID there in general, I think is still useful to see what people are working on and
Oh yeah.
Bonus right here. You can actually link your ORCID ID to your GitHub.
That is the thing. That became a
I'll-
feature this
I
year.
actually made a how-to doc because someone asked me to, so I'll just link that in the chat if anyone's interested. And you can do vice versa too. So
There you go.
even better. Okay, cool. Well, thanks for spearheading that, Sean. Were there any other?
Yeah.
Oh, I see another comment. Oh, okay. Sounds good, Kevin. Any other issues that people had seen and wanted to make sure that our minds are on it, especially thinking towards the fall meeting and time for discussion? I'll give it another 10 seconds.
Well, I wanted to bring up Nick's. This is a different topic, but I wanted to bring up Nick's pre-commit pull request because it's not a FEP.
Yeah, I could talk about that for a sec.
Sure. Or we have Nick too.
There's Nick. Oh, there is at the bottom.
Cough, cough.
Apologies,
Nick.
Michael.
Oh, yeah. I'm trying to remember this from like 17 years ago. But if you're not familiar with pre-commit, it's a way that you can set up a Git hook for like when you commit it, do a commit message that runs a bunch of checks. And it can also do some auto fixes. So I don't have the pull request up right now, but it does things like remove trailing white space, and then like make sure there's no like ambiguous characters or things like that. So I don't think there was any, and does like a code spelling check also with one or two.
Yeah, and you so kindly opened that PR for us like a year ago, Nick, and then I self-requested a review on that shortly afterwards and then let it completely fall to the floor for an entire year. So I apologize for that. It had recently got put back on my radar, and actually I did ask one clarifying question in there, Nick, when you have time to go back through and answer it. I was basically I was sort of new to the concept and I hadn't taken the time to do the research. So I went through and got a quick summary of what I think this is going to do and when things would be automatic, when they wouldn't be. When you get a chance, if you could go through and either tell me, yeah, that's all correct, you understood the assignment, or clarify where if I got anything wrong, that would be helpful.
Okay, I think Nabil ended up answering them. Oh yeah, and one other neat thing about pre-commit is that if you respond on a comment, if per pull request, if you comment it with pre-commit.ci autofix, it will automatically apply the changes in a new commit, which is pretty handy. So,
Okay. Rebecca, your hand's up.
So I guess clarifying question. Maybe someone else has the same one. Is this a suggestion on methods to use for the standards repository, or is this a suggestion for best practices in all of PyHC, or could it be both but separately?
this particular pull request is essentially like infrastructure for this repository. So it's like a set of checks that get run to make sure that like the documents don't have any trailing white space and things like that.
Okay.
It's this itself wasn't a recommendation, but personally I do recommend it. It's very useful and only moderately annoying.
Okay, thanks.
Yep. And I like the idea of putting it here first, just to check, make sure we don't do stupid things like spell words wrong in our FEPs, or have bad white space in the standards document, blah blah blah, that kind of thing. Where the PR stands at the moment, unless anyone feels like jumping in and giving feedback on this, which is of course welcome at any time, is if we merged it right now, it wouldn't do anything. So no one has put up any mechanism to actually activate it. And Nabil, you were kind and basically listed the two choices we have for how to integrate this. So it's on my to-do list now to go through and think of a way to activate that, probably by just having a GitHub Actions that will run this on PRs and merges. Is probably what I'm leaning toward. But yeah, it's on my to-do list here to think of a mechanism to activate that and then merge it in pretty soon, because it's a good idea and I let it sit around for too long, I think.
Yeah, there's a way you can do this without GitHub Actions. So we can talk later.
Cool.
All right. Third and maybe final time. Any other issues that people wanted to get eyes on and thinking about before the meeting? I think we hit all the big ones.
I wanted to bring up the tables thing if there's nothing further that needs to happen.
Yeah, go ahead. We'll be chatting the actual VEPs in the PRs themselves soon.
Yeah, no, I just this seemed like if we've got people's attention here, just both bringing it up and seeing if there's some kick around. So I threw in the issue that the real thumbnail here is that we decide in the FEP1 process, without a lot of deliberation, which is probably a mistake, to stick with strict common mark for Markdown. And Julie then proceeded to write a FEP with a table in it, thinking that no, Julie, I'm not throwing you under the bus. This is it seemed like a perfectly reasonable thing. You go, how do you do a table in Markdown? You do a table. And of course that is not actually common mark, it's a GitHub extension. So now we're faced with the question of, do we make Julie rewrite that and try to figure out some other way to present that? Or do we go, oops, let's allow GitHub extensions, or oops, let's just allow tables, or something else? So want to throw that out there. And my 2 cents is this is just kind of a difficult tension between features are great, flexibility is great, standards are also great, and stuff that's broadly supported is great. So it really is kind of where we want to put our priorities. I think to show my hand, normally I lean on the side of stricter standards because we think standards are great things, but so if in doubt, lean that way. But hey, oh goody, and now Nick's throwing a whole other flavor out there. So okay, we'll have fun. Go for it.
Well, as far as my FEP goes, I'm in favor of keeping a table for sure. Um, I mean, I'll briefly chat through kind of what my FEP looks like and what it's about in a minute. But yeah, there's a table in there to describe the different tiering levels for all the packages, and then, what it means for each level and so forth for each category that I have listed. I can't, off the top of my head, think of a decent replacement for that, so I'm inclined to keep the tables. Um, but I think it'd be good to have some discussion surrounding general guidance on this. Other thoughts, maybe?
I mean, I like Markdown. I use it all the time, but it's annoying that there are so many different possible flavors of it and that it can render in so many different ways. But, I know whatever we all love to hate restructured text because it's awkward to write. But at the same time, we all have to write it anyway because it's what I think almost all of us use for documenting our packages. And there's only one version. There's no flavors. There's no, you know, there, yeah, there are annoyances I appreciate, but it doesn't suffer from this kind of multi-flavor problem, if you will. So that would be my recommendation. And if you're just writing text, if you're having to include the odd table now and then, whatever, it's okay. But if you're just including text, it's not functionally that different from Markdown anyway. That would be my suggestion.
So I will say, well, RST is what the PEPs are written in. So that was under consideration, and we chose not to, but there's still there's a good justification made for RST. And
GitHub will
the idea
render
behind,
it.
sorry?
GitHub will render it like as nice looking text as well. Yeah, by default. Yep.
Yeah. And the reason for common work was specifically to try to dodge the too many flavors question. But of course, that doesn't make the other flavors not exist.
It's kind of impossible at some point. It always comes
Yeah.
back to at some point.
And it's the XKCD problem, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I guess also like restructured text isn't going away anytime soon. Like again, we're all of our documentation, or I imagine almost all of our documentation is written in it. So, we have to deal with it regardless. You might as well keep dealing with it.
Okay. Hopefully that helps shape more the direction of the issue that's now up on GitHub. Thanks for putting that up there, John.
Yeah, and if people who have said things can go in and post it as comments, I'm happy to transcribe. I think it's better to have it there with people's names attached.
Definitely. Rebecca, I saw you'd unmuted for a second. Do you have thoughts?
Tables are really nice ways to have less text and more information. For instance, in the one with the package levels, it would take many pages to just describe the information in the table instead of presenting it in that way. I do think tables should be supported. I don't particularly care which way. Just pick something. Pick something nice and let's go with it, right? Or at least 2 or 3 options. I don't know.
Agreed.
Okay, cool. I'm going to close the issues idea for now. And I think I'll do it in this order. Sean, do you want to go through your FEP? Just a quick summary of what it is, where it's at now. And if people have any huge tomatoes to throw, they can do so now so you know before we try to do a vote on it.
I am prepared to do that. Yes. So let's see here. I think I already had this opened up in a tab. Yes, I did. So how about I share my screen real quick? And keeping in mind, we've got about, 17 minutes to the top of the hour. So I'll try not to belabor this part here. But I think minus the first FEP, mine's been up for the longest. So hopefully when I hit share here, all right, we're all looking at GitHub. Yeah. All right, sweet. Yeah. And yeah, mine's been kind of open for the longest at this point now. And I've had many rounds of revisions and lots of helpful comments, conversation, got 67 things going on there. And I think I'm at this point, dare I say it, where there are no remaining open issues left on my thing, which is why at the beginning of this, I was talking about I would like to announce a first vote for this pretty soon. But to give the quick overview, I think I've done this for pretty much everyone on the call. Maybe stop me if you've never seen this before and want me to go any deeper, but I'll go fairly quickly unless that happens. Basically, the idea is adopting spec 0 is what this PR does in one sentence, which I can go ahead and open that up in a new tab. That's Scientific Pythons. They have specs, which are their ecosystem coordination documents. And this one over here recommends their minimum supported dependencies policy. So that's basically summarized in this little Gantt chart they have over here for, this is their policy for when they are going to adopt new versions of certain packages and Python languages, and when they, how long they're expected to support them for. So I've basically written this FEP to basically just say we're adopting spec 0 without much modification to that. The three main points are supporting Python versions for at least 3 years after their initial release. And then the upstream core scientific Python packages, we're saying support them for at least 2 years after their initial release. And then the bit that we added to this FEP that does not exist in the original document is supporting new versions of these dependencies within 6 months of their release. And for the time being, this applies to these specific packages, not because they are a comprehensive list of all of the upstream packages we care about, but simply because these are the core scientific Python packages. So these are the ones that are affected by the policy of the spec 0, and therefore they're the ones that are affected by the policy of FEP3 at the moment. There could be later add-ons to this. We could write a new FEP to decide there are also packages we care so much about. We would like them added to this list, but that is not in the scope for this here. And yeah, inside the actual document itself, which I can click rendered current text of the FEP to get to mine, I've also got a similar Gantt chart here. And part of the how to teach this is going to be basically adding this versioning policy and an updated version of this kind of chart somewhere on the PyHC website around the projects page where people can see what packages and versions should be expected to be supported at any given time by PyHC. And there's also going to be automated email reminders that would get sent out around say if it's been 3 years since a certain version of Python has been released and you're allowed to drop support for it soon, we would get an email on the PyHC email list for that. Or like, hey, NumPy 3 just came out. Here we go, 6 months to support it. Let's get ready, community. That kind of stuff would be happening. I've got a little code snippet to generate the support schedules if you feel like it. And there were a few rejected ideas, like NumPy's enhancement policy also had a support window very similar to this, but it was like keeping Python versions for 42 months instead of 36. We decided to stick with 36. The scope of this FEP was originally just Python version support, and people decided adding the upstream packages was a worthy enough effort and related enough that we should add it to the document. And at one point, this policy was looking more like a must, like I was going to be dictating up on high that all PyHC packages must follow this versioning scheme to keep interoperability high among our community, but decided to go with slightly weaker should language instead, which I think makes merging this document less controversial because it's really just a recommendation. We're saying this would be the good versioning policy to follow, and we're going to recommend people do that. in Julie's PyHC package tiering FEP, there's going to be some discussions on bonuses or recommendations you can get for whether or not you are following this thing. So it could have some downstream consequences, but yes, keeping it as this FEP recommends at the moment. And yeah, there's a quick summary of what it is, where it's at. And yeah, I'm seeing a couple bubbles in my chat, so let me quickly stop talking and go read these. Oh, suggested change. You only have to support these packages if they're actually a dependency of the package you use. Yes, I did think that was implied here, but I could see that being worth explicitly mentioning that yes, like if your package doesn't use NumPy, then you don't have to care about the support window versioning for NumPy. And one more, sorry. There's an issue for
Right. So
Oh, nice.
UV is a new Python packaging tool, and they recently had some new updates that expanded abilities to work with like PyProject.toml. And so I figured, hey, they're doing a lot of stuff already. Wouldn't it be nice to have a way to do updates to the minimum requirements for NumPy and such as per spec 0 so that we don't have to. So if that functionality sounds good to you or sounds helpful, then feel free to comment on that issue or like it. So
Sweet.
it'd make it following FEP3 easier if you want to do the strict dropped after 24 months thing.
Well, cool. Way to engage in open science there, Nick. Cool. I don't want to rush the discussion away from this, but I feel like I should give the floor away just to give time to other people who are having things to talk about here in this meeting.
Sure. And if you have further thoughts or other, modifications you want made to this, please go to the GitHub issue, or I should say pull request really, and leave some comments and some thoughts so Sean can incorporate those before a potential, first vote at our upcoming fall meeting. And this is also a ping if you haven't registered to please do so. And if you're presenting, my emails only go out to those who have registered.
Sweet. Well, hitting the stop button.
Cool. I don't want to steal too much of the flow with my thing. I can talk more about it later if needed. Nabil, do you want to go ahead and go through the time FEP you have up, where it started, and how you've modified it since based on feedback and what it actually is now?
Sure. So, share my screen, I guess. Hold on, give me a second. Right. So this FEP obviously started off as a desire to try and standardize the ecosystem around AstroPy.time. There was a lot of comments, suggestions, questions that were that we've been discussing on the pull request. So after the last core meeting, we decided that actually this would turn into a different style. So the idea now is that if you can use daytime, you should use daytime. If you need something more advanced, we recommend that you use AstroPy time, and that's mostly the FAP now. So it's much more straightforward. It's just if you can use daytime, you don't need to worry about anything. If you use not AstroPy time but use something else, you should try to push towards AstroPy time. And I did add one caveat that I would like to push for like AstroPy time as like in the future, obviously, because obviously it doesn't integrate with pandas and Xarray. but with ashpy.time being a equal partner as datetime. So the idea is that eventually I would like libraries to support ashpy.time as a datetime input. They can then deal with that how they want. If they just want to cast datetime and then do that and then return ashpy.time at the end, it's up to them. But future that's a future kind of goal of the FEP. But for now, it's just daytime, or if you don't use ashpy.time but use something else, use ashpy.time. And yeah, so people can review it. There's still a lot of the old language from the old rationale from last time, so maybe it can be cut down further. But the core, the abstract, the motivation is much more reduced now, and the specification is also the main part. So I don't know if people have questions or they want to review this when they have time.
Any initial thoughts or comments or suggestions based on the state that the FEP is in now? I know there were a lot of thoughts when it was purely suggesting only AstroPy, but it's obviously a little different in this state.
I think the restructuring hopefully addresses a lot of the concerns, because there's a bunch of almost borderline argumenting in the PR about like, oh, please don't force me to use AstroPy. I don't want to. But I think that was mostly coming from datetime users. And now that it's in this state, hopefully that satisfied some people.
So I haven't said anything because I haven't had a chance to read the changes yet. But Nabil, I really appreciate you listening and pivoting and putting a lot of work into this. So like conceptually, this sounds really good to me. And if I have changes, it's going to be more wordsmithing type stuff.
Sure.
I just have not had time to dig. I apologize.
Yeah, it's since the changes, no one's had time to. People are busy. It's that time of year, so.
I think it's always that time of year sometimes.
Well, yeah, that's true. Yeah.
John,
Yeah, so hopefully, I'm just hoping this is slightly less controversial now, and then we can come towards some sort of shared vision of time for PyHC.
Yeah, you've been a great spearheader for this, Nabil. And John, correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't SpacePy basically like the main other PyHC package that had a special object?
That is the problem with this FEP, is it kind of feels like I'm picking on SpacePy, whereas before I was picking on everyone.
Yeah, well,
keep it tomatoes, don't throw rocks, please.
I think, yeah, it's interesting because I don't think anybody has gone with like datetime 64, for instance, right? I don't think anybody's using that. Now, somebody's probably going to correct me, but pandas might. But
yeah, I'm pretty sure its standard datetime index is not 64, but you can probably select it.
There you go. There's your example, John.
there's Jim.
Yeah, I haven't really talked about NumPy datetime 64s here either, but maybe that's something to also consider.
I think it's an interesting question because they don't really offer a lot more utility, but then they probably provide some small efficiency improvement. Jim, is there a reason you guys went with that? Do you know the ups and downs?
Yeah, I think there was an issue with standard date time that I think they're moving everybody to use time zone aware objects, and that's not supported by Xarray. So we had problems like with interpolation.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, I guess, Jim, if you could leave your thoughts on the pull request for this particular FAB, we can take that into consideration. And I also want to echo the sentiments. Thank you, Nabil, for putting this together, for pivoting, for putting a lot of work into this. We have 1 minute left, so I'm not even gonna try with my FEP. But I'm going to put some dedicated time for conversations, maybe hacking, updating if we need to, creating new FEPs from issues, that kind of thing at the fall meeting. So this telecom was really kind of to serve to get these ideas on your radar and be thinking of them so we can be a bit more productive in 2 months' time.
And Julie, I'd suggest that on anything where we think that work at the meeting might move us to a point of being able to vote, to go ahead and announce that there's going to be a vote at the meeting.
I like it.
Right? Because, we might not have full consensus before then, but I would hate to sit down and have a really productive session at the meeting and go, well, we didn't say we were going to vote on it, so
Yeah.
wait another 6 months.
Yeah. Are you allowed to announce that there will be a vote, but then you hack on it at the meeting and then we decide, actually, no.
Yeah, you can. You have to announce that the vote's going to happen, but you can revise right up until the moment of the vote. It's just in between the two votes that you can't do revisions.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah. From a process standpoint, I don't see anything wrong with if we decide to bail and say, never mind, we're not voting after all. Something bad happened. So
Sure. And there's a no vote also is not the end of the line either, right?
Yeah, that's true.
So yeah, so maybe then should we be announcing? Does yours, Julie, even have a FEP number yet? Or are you still at 9999 or are you FEP 4 now?
I think I tentatively put it as FEP 4, but if Nabil's with the changes is in a better state to be FEP 4, I can pivot.
I think the FEP editor should step in and assign those numbers.
Yep.
Those both seem to be in good enough states to have a number.
That would have been me, and I would have done it by this point, I think. So let's go ahead and keep yours at 4. So I think, yeah, Julie, if when you send out the meeting summary for this one here, can you announce votes for both 3 and 4 at the fall meeting now?
Sure.
Wow. All right then. Balls are rolling. You got this.
Nabil, do you feel ready for that? You'll be ready for a vote by the fall meeting?
Sure. Yeah, I think so.
Okay, cool. And yeah, again, I encourage everyone. I know there have been several updates to these various FEPs, so please take a look as they are now and comment on their current states if you have further thoughts or suggestions. And we are 1 minute over, so I don't want to belabor any of this longer. Let me quickly look at the PyHC calendar for when our next meeting is. I should have had that pulled up anyway. I'm pretty sure, yeah, we've got a telecon coming up on October 7th. Someone's going to be talking about a new package idea. And then directly the week after that is Dash, an idea. And then I think I gave us a break for a few weeks until November 4th from telecons and meetings. So that's what's coming up. And thank you everyone for coming and giving thoughts and participating. Really appreciate it.